Manchester City have won 4 of the last 5 Premier League titles, 6 of the last 7, as well as a Champions League and multiple Carabao Cups in that time span. Pep Guardiola has led this side to 4 of the last 5 Premier League titles, as the only title that he hasn't won was a Mohamed Salah-led Liverpool side under Arne Slot last season. Going into the season this year, off the back of that Premier League title, Liverpool invested heavily in the transfer window alongside Arsenal, who were probably seen as the main contenders for the Premier League going into this season, with Manchester City being seen as a faraway third. That is not the case. It looks like for a whole host of reasons, Liverpool are not going to be challenging for the league title this year, while Arsenal are still the team it looks like to beat. But that's a video for another day, and probably a video I do need to make about Liverpool, discussing all the problems they've had this season, the way in which it looks like Arne Slot is starting to figure things out. But today I want to discuss Manchester City and why this team, could they win it? Now, as I said, going into the season, there was a lot of build-up about who was going to be challenging for the Premier League. I was one of the few people who genuinely believed that Liverpool and Manchester City, as well as Arsenal, would be a 3-horse race. I didn't think that Manchester City would be as close to Liverpool and Arsenal, but I thought it would be a competitive title race. I actually believed that Manchester City would finish above Liverpool, with Arsenal winning the Premier League, because I felt as though with all the players that Liverpool were bringing in, and Alexander Isak, Ekitike, these are great players, but it's not easy to integrate these sort of names into a squad that already had a set structure the year before. And for some reason, I just had belief. I had belief in my old dog, my GOAT, Pep Guardiola, that he would just figure things out. But as I said, I did expect Arsenal to win the league, and pretty comfortably at that. Now, when discussing the Premier League title, there are a whole host of things you need to discuss. Is the team got X-factor players? Does the team have a solid enough defense? Does the team have the depth to go all the way? Does the team have a manager who's capable of helping the team in moments of crisis? And this season, we've seen a whole host of things that convince us that Manchester City could win the title, but also convince us otherwise. And I want to start with the things that I think might be Manchester City's Achilles heel. And I think the thing we need to start off with, for me, is the 4 games in which they've lost this season. Now, these 4 games in which they've lost this season being Brighton, Spurs, Aston Villa, and Newcastle. Now, in isolation, you can look at those games and take them for what they are and say that perhaps they're not losses that need to be really analyzed in depth as to why Manchester City might not win the league. But I think the common theme you saw throughout those games was the physicality issue that Manchester City have, as well as an intensity issue. I do think that those things have improved in the last few weeks with Manchester City, as well as Pep Guardiola. I think it's something that he started to acknowledge is going to be a major pattern in the Premier League this season and for many seasons to come. And you're starting to see his team is a bit more direct. They're a bit more able to play that intense football, more physical side of the game. And you're seeing that improvement in their results in the last few weeks. But these 4 games for me, I look at them in isolation. As I said, the Brighton game, I feel as though Brighton is one of those teams that if you're not well set up, Brighton are a good footballing side and they will beat you if you're not well set up. Newcastle away is always a tough fixture, and I think Arsenal winning at St. James's Park is probably going to be one of those fixtures we earmark as the reason why they're going to be Premier League champions, in my opinion. I think the game against Newcastle, they had a few chances in that game that on another day, if they had taken them, I think it would have been a whole different story. And the other 2 defeats being Aston Villa, I believe that as the weeks go on, you start to see that defeat probably isn't as big of a problem for Manchester City as we probably thought in the moment, because now Aston Villa are on a 9-game winning run and are probably the most informed side in the Premier League, having just beaten Arsenal 2 weeks ago, as well as the game against Spurs. To be very honest with you, I generally just believe it doesn't matter what Manchester City do. We've seen Manchester City win Premier Leagues. We've seen Manchester City win trebles. We've seen Manchester City win domestic trebles, 6 trophies in one season, and Spurs still beat them. So I don't think we should really go in depth into that game and look at it as a real negative for Manchester City. But it is something to look at because I do think it ties to the fact that I think Manchester City's floor is very low, in the sense that whenever Manchester City don't play well, say for example, they have a game where maybe their players aren't clicking, they play really, really badly, to the point that teams that you would expect Manchester City to beat regularly, they can get absolutely pumped. Whereas with a team like Arsenal, for example, I feel Arsenal's floor is very high. When discussing Arsenal, I feel as though the way in which they play and the way in which they set up their team against any side in world football, even if Arsenal were to have a very bad game, which is not very often. I'd say Arsenal have only had probably 2 bad games this whole season. Even if Arsenal were to have a very bad game, it would probably be a draw or they lose in a slender game such as the Aston Villa game. But you don't see Arsenal play really, really, really badly. Whereas Manchester City, there are some games I watch them and I think this team is completely wide open. and some of the most average teams in the league can really get at them. You look at a game against Fulham, these 4 games that I mentioned as well. Even the last minute winner that Phil Foden had to notch against Leeds for them to even get 3 points in that game. A Leeds team that are fighting relegation this year. So it's not all smooth with Manchester City, but there are a lot of good things as well. And before I even move on to the good things and the reason why I think Manchester City is a team that people should look at, is that I don't think they have the depth that they would like. Now they have the numbers and they have the players in the names for those areas of the pitch where you would like to have depth, whereas such as the striker position, the goalkeepers, the midfield, the heart and spine of your team. They have a lot of defenders who can, come in and play crucial minutes and crucial times of the season, but I look at these players and I don't look at players that are reliable. I don't look at players that can give you a consistent level. I don't look at players that is kind of just plug and play. You look at someone like Nathan Ake, struggled with injuries for a long time. John Stones, likewise. People like Tijani Reinders is not in a great moment at this time. Rico Lewis, we saw that trouble-winning season where he was incredible, and he was the real catalyst for Manchester City's resurgence in the second half of the season. He has not been at that level for almost 2 years now. So there's a lot of players in the squad. Savinho, or Savio as we call him now because we've rescinded his Inho. He's no longer Brazilian now. He's been poor. He's been poor the entire season. So there are definitely holes in this Manchester City team that I can see them kind of falling away as the season goes on. But at the same time, as I said, there are a lot of good things. And the first good thing I want to talk about Manchester City's X Factor. Now, look, this is a word that people have thrown around for so long, and I think people throw it around in football in general a bit too much, and they give it to players that really and truly should not be getting these tags. But Manchester City have so many X Factor players. And this is something they had when they used to be a dominant side. Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Riyad Mahrez, Sergio Aguero. The list goes on and on. And I think now you're starting to see that core of X Factor players start to show themselves again at Manchester City. Erling Haaland, the numbers are what they are. Phil Foden, a player who has really improved from last season. Jeremy Doku, Ryan Cherki. These 4 players this season have showed you that going forward, maybe Manchester City might not be that strong defensively, particularly in the fullback areas, but going forward, they're one of the most exciting teams in all of world football. The most goals scored in the Premier League, the highest XG as well, creating the most chances, the 4th highest possession average in the league behind only Chelsea, Liverpool, and Arsenal. It shows you that not only is Pep Guardiola diverted away from that possession-heavy style of play, but he's willing to let these players ball out. And someone like Ryan Cherki, oh my goodness, this guy is playing at an elite level. And those names that we mentioned in the likes of Cherki, Foden, and Doku, I love what they're doing this year because there was a moment in the season where you looked at Manchester City and you looked at Erling Haaland and said, who is helping this guy? I think there was a moment in the season where there was a running joke that Man City's second highest goal scorer in the Premier League was own goals. A guy from Burnley, I can't remember his name. I think it was a Steve or something. But in these last few weeks, you're starting to see the backup singers really show their voice. Ryan Cherki is in the top 5% for progressive carries, progressive passes, chances created, and assists in the Premier League. Phil Foden is already 6 goals and assists away from his tally from last season where he was really, really poor. And then Jeremy Doku has just gone up another level this season. We saw it in the Liverpool game, his incisiveness. His end product is he actually looks like he's finally starting to find that end product that he's been looking for so long. He reminds me of a player like Vinicius Jr., who the talent was obviously there 5 years ago, and there was all that explosivity, but it looked like he couldn't really piece it all together. And in the real crucial moments where you needed a bit of composure, he didn't really have it. But I think with Doku this year, you're seeing that maturity in his game, an ability to slow the game down when he needs to, an ability to quicken it up when he needs to, knowing when to stay touch tight, knowing when to run in behind. He's just been incredible. And a player for me who I think has been a real illustration of this Manchester City resurgence this year. And it seems as though every single time Arsenal want to win a Premier League title, this man refuses to sit down and take it. And that man is Phil Foden. Phil Foden, we need to talk about Phil Foden because, of course, we saw what he did last year. We saw the poor performances he had. We saw the lack of real incisiveness and effectiveness that we saw from him in the PFA Player of the Season year. But I think one thing people need to understand is this is a player who is supremely talented. And I think the same way people were so quick to get onto him last year, they should be equally as quick to praise him this year. Pep Guardiola stated many times that this was a player who was struggling mentally off the field. He had his own personal problems that he was dealing with. And you could kind of see that he wasn't really enjoying his football. We weren't seeing the same Phil Foden that we saw in the 23-24 season. But this year, he looks like a man reborn. Playing alongside a player like Ryan Cherki, that would make anybody happy. Genuinely, that would make anybody happy. And you're starting to see him play a bit deeper in the Manchester City setup. And I think we're starting to understand that maybe he isn't that creative dynamo that we thought he was at a younger age. Maybe Phil Foden is a bit more effective, closer to goal, behind the striker, scoring goals, getting in behind, playing close to Erling Haaland, and kind of picking off the scraps that you get from a target man like him. And some of his goals catalog in that zone 14, outside the box, it's cash money with Phil Foden. And for me, when he's hitting these sort of levels that you're seeing, he's one of the most unplayable players in the Premier League and one of the best in the world. Of course, his England performances do not match up with what he does with Manchester City, but I think it's one of those situations where you need to just remove the player from the narrative and just watch what you're seeing, because what Phil Foden is offering every single week for Man City, it's nothing short of breathtaking. Another key reason, and probably the most key reason of all, or most important reason of all, is Manchester City have been here before. Look, and I'll probably make a video on this in regards to Arsenal, where it feels as though every single time Arsenal lose a game or drop points, it seems like the world is about to end. Whereas with Manchester City, who have already lost 4 games this season, by the way, it feels like they're just chugging along, taking game by game. The manager has been here before. You look at the press conferences of Pep Guardiola, it seems as though he's always saying the most provocative thing he could possibly say to get the pressure away from his players. Because this is a young group of players. These are a lot of players who have never been in this situation before. But again, that spine of Manchester City, your Donnarummas, your Diaz's, your Vardios, your Haalands, your Fodens, your Rodris, who's currently injured, your Bernardos, they've been here. They know what it means to win a Premier League. They know what it means to play 4 games in 10 days in the Christmas period. They know what it means to play in the terrible Manchester weather in a tough part of the season when you have a team like Arsenal, game in, game out, consistently winning, just keeping touch tight. The moment they slip up, you're there. They know what it takes. And I think that that's something Arsenal don't have. And I think it's something that in the long run of a long season, a title race season, who knows? That might be the difference between Manchester City winning this and Arsenal falling away, or Manchester City falling away themselves. Because those newer players, one thing I will say, it looks like they're learning. Because I look at a game, and this was a game that I really pinpointed, right? I really pinpointed it as a game that, we might need to start taking these guys seriously. And it was the Real Madrid away game. I think that was just last week. For Manchester City to go away to the Bernabeu. Now, admittedly, Real Madrid have not been good this year. But one thing I will tell you is Real Madrid get up for a Champions League game. It doesn't matter the opposition. It doesn't matter the point in the season. It doesn't matter how bad they're playing. They will turn up. And for Manchester City to go there and not only go 1-0 down, but be under the cosh, suffer as much as they did defensively, but take their chances when they had them and hold on to it in the final 10, 15, 20 minutes the way they did, I think that not only, of course, it's an incredible result, an incredible victory that you can wave your flag in Europe and say, we beat Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, but I think it's a result that sends confidence throughout an entire squad. A squad full of players that haven't been in these moments before. A Ryan Cherki has never played in a Champions League game against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. A Jeremy Doku has not been a pivotal figure in a team that has gone away to the Bernabeu and won. These players are learning. Nico Gonzalez, who has been incredible in Rodri's absence. This Manchester City team can go another level. Because if we're being completely honest, Phil Foden is not playing at his best level yet. Ryan Cherki is still adapting to the league. Jeremy Doku is still a bit inconsistent in ways. Nico Gonzalez is not Manchester City starting CDM. They still have a Ballon d'Or winning level CDM to come back into the fray. You've got defenders in Nico O'Reilly who's still learning every single week. You've got Josko Vardiol and Diaz who are a solid defensive pairing. Mateus Nunes, in my opinion, is not that great, and you can improve on him if anything. And you still got players like Marmoush and Sarvinho who are still figuring things out. So Manchester City can go to another level. Yet, they're only 2 points behind Arsenal. And that's what I continue saying with Arsenal. It feels as though their floor is incredibly high, but their ceiling is not that much higher than their floor. Whereas with Manchester City, their floor is very low, but their ceiling is sky high. Their ceiling is sky high. And I think it's those X-Factor players that do that for you. In games where you're not able to figure out the opposition, you're not able to break down that low block, you're not able to break away from that parity that you're suffering with the opposition, players like Phil Foden come to the fray. Players like Erling Haaland do what he does. Players like Ryan Cherki show you why he's one of the most talented players in world football. Arsenal don't have that. But you could throw the same argument. Martinelli's not performing very well. Martin Odegaard's been injured. we've had a lot of injuries. Gabriel's been out. We've not had consistency. We've not been able to throw out our best 11. Havertz has been injured the whole season. Gabriel Jesus. These are all things you can say as well. But it will be interesting to see. I think personally, these next few games will tell me all I need to know. I'm intrigued, but I've not bought. I'm intrigued, but I've not bought. Nottingham Forest away, Sunderland away, Brighton and Chelsea at home. These 4 games will tell me everything I need to know about this City team. Because those are 4 games that if we see the City that we saw at the start of the season, don't be surprised if you see them win 1 out of 4. But if we see the City that we've been seeing in recent games, and they go out there and get all 12 points in a Christmas period that's packed with games, and Arsenal are also under pressure, and Arsenal have to go to Everton, Arsenal have to play against Aston Villa again, who knows? Me personally, I think they're a year away from being a year away. I think they're a year early. I think next year, they'll be right there with Arsenal. As in, right there with Arsenal. And then the year after that, I think they win it. But this year, I still have my money on Arsenal. But the fact that we're even saying this for a Manchester City team that prior to the season, nobody thought they were going to win the league. I don't even think the most optimistic Man City fans would have told you to your face, Manchester City will win the league. And they're 2 points behind Arsenal, who a few weeks ago we were saying are the best team in the world. So let me know what you guys think. Are you intrigued in Manchester City as much as I am? Do you think this is all just a good run of form? Who do you think is going to win the Premier League title? And as always, take care of yourselves.